Hello, everybody. It's Alex here from Guelph. It's about 5:30, and now with the time change, it's dark. So I'm joining you with a beverage and to share with you something that I've been thinking about after watching Christina's data presentation about extracting the technologies and the ecosystem services literature, and about thinking about how it immediately made me think about how we could visualize it. And one of the ways was using the actual words that were used in that in those papers to create a literature landscape. So what I've called this is mapping the literature landscape of what we're calling the manufactured ecosystem. So in a sense, this is specifically, as it says there on the screen there, a cluster analysis of words in the abstract, and then using some ecological analyses of similarity, of community similarity, to look for groups that we would see a priori, so groups that we would approach the literature thinking, and then examine the groups that maybe the literature is showing us that we didn't see beforehand. So that's where we're going. So this is where I've started, is with this amazing data set that Christina and company have created. And what you're looking at here is a subset of the soil data set that they had codified based on you can see some of the categories here, the source title, the document type, blah, 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 and the abstract. And this is super useful that it's all here in this form because it makes it very easy to extract and to analyze. And the coding here, the color, is the first pass that Christina did to codify whether the paper was one that fit with ecosystem services technology that might, that's in orange, and then in red that doesn't. It might be an ecosystem service, but it's not a technology. Now, the first thing that I did was take this Excel or Google Sheet, and I created this kind of really simplified, stripped down, comma-separated version of it that's just author and year, and a category. That's the category that Christina evaluated the data on, and then the abstract. And what I then did was import that into R and to use several different R packages to extract and calculate the word use from each of those articles, and to essentially take the data set, this is 61 papers right now that I've tested here, and to take all of those abstracts and then to create what I think of as an ecologist as an incidence or an occurrence matrix. So here on the left-hand side, you've got, these are all of the rows here, these are the papers. All of the columns, these are the words that are used in those papers, and then the numbers as you scroll down are the number of times that particular paper used those words. So there's a can-do attitude. So there I'm just looking at the column P here, and you can see there's lots of uses of the word can. There's a pretty naive is maybe too strong a word, but a reductionist view. Can the word use show us things about the literature landscape that we don't see otherwise? Well, to do that, from an ecologist perspective, the first thing that I want to do is to create from this kind of occupancy matrix, a similarity matrix to see how similar the word use is between one paper and the other. And we can do this in a number of ways, and this is just so we're essentially then going to use those pairwise distances to either create what we could make a tree, not a phylogeny, but like a similarity tree, to see who on the tree, which publications are more similar in their word than others, and extract some from that. So this is the soil data, and these are three groups that the analysis finds in the data. We see there, and you can kind of look at them here. So we've got a clustering dendrogram. So the closer together things are over here on the left, the more similar they are. So we've got three groups. Group 2 and 3 are rather similar. Group 1 is different, quite different from group 2. What we could do in a very kind of a data-driven sense, not us approaching the data a priori saying, well, this is how we understand, these are the groups that we want to test. This could be us extracting the groups from the data to say, well, what does this correspond to? What groups are within the data that we might be aware of or not? Park this image later on because I'm going to come back to it. Another kind of analysis that we could do is essentially trying to use that similarity matrix of the word use in the abstracts of all the papers in the database that Christina has made to build a map of the landscape, of the literature landscape. The analogy here, so I'm an old fellow, and I'm quite familiar with kind of looking, when I look at a map, that if I wanted to figure out how far it was to drive from city A to city B, I would be looking at this. And so this is basically a pairwise distance matrix. On the bottom of the diagonal is the distance from Oslo to wherever, MoMA, to just the pairwise distance, in this case of geographic distances, of road-based distances. So we have this. We have the map, we have the pairwise distance. And I guess the question is, can we make this? Can we make the landscape based on the pairwise distances? And there is a kind of analysis, that pretty simple analysis that we can use, multivariate analysis called NMDS, or non-metric multidimensional scaling, where you would take these measures, these in this case geographic measures, and plot them. And when I've done that here on the bottom, you can see it doesn't exactly create the map of Europe, but it does parse big regions. You can see kind of the Scandinavian nations versus the Mediterranean nations. And if we have other metadata about this data, so data of the data, so in this case it might be elevation or temperature or salinity, or all sorts of things that could help us better understand this map. So these, in our case, would be, of the literature, categories or descriptions that help us create and understand the literature landscape map that we're trying to create of the manufactured ecosystem. So how would that work with Christina's data? Well, we can create, excuse me, a dissimilarity or a similarity, however you want. They're kind of the same thing. You want to see the glass half full or half empty, of word use in the papers, and then map the distances between the publications, reduce them to 2 dimensions to view the literature landscape. So if we do that, these are all the papers from Christina's soil data set mapped into this 2-dimensional NMDS space. So this is the map, and they're color coded here in the same way they were in the original Excel file, where the green dots are the ones that fit with the ecosystem service technology, the orange are the maybes, and the red are the probably doesn't. These are then 95% confidence ellipsoids that I plot, that you can plot around those communities of papers, the ones that we've directed the literature to say, and then we can conduct tests to say, well, are they significantly different? In this case, they're not, but they're intriguingly different in that the most different group here is the ones that Christine identified as fitting to the environmental science technology, and then groups 2 and 3 are really similar. And so it maybe suggests that, yeah, follow that along, because this analysis is finding the same things that you're seeing. That's encouraging and maybe suggestive of the value of this kind of expanding this out into the larger data set. You can then do all sorts of things in this environment this kind of modeling environment, to ask questions about the data, to say, well, so which one, you want to know which one of these particular dots, which paper is which. You can plot it over and search that to see for papers, to look for papers that perhaps are shifting the landscape or driving the differences between different ways of looking at the world. And or, in a much more complicated way, you can look for different words that are driving the shapes of these ellipsoids and the shape of the landscape. And I mentioned earlier, one of the things with the tree base, so trees or maps, or the clustering versus the non-metric multidimensional scaling, one can feed the other. So this is on the left-hand side of the screen is the clustering and algorithm, and then if you follow it across to the right, this is the algorithm. These are the same groups plotted over onto that NMDS plot, and it looks like it's finding approximately the same landscape that Christina did. Some of the specific papers differ as to where they were included. So, for example, the plot on the right-hand side, category 1, is this big group. Some of the papers in that big group, many of them correspond to the FITS ecosystem services, the green category of Christina's analysis, but some don't. Some of them differ, and then these are 2 and 3. Some differ, some don't. So you could, although it's interesting to me right off the bat that it's seemingly reproducing the same landscape, it's also the specifics of how it's coding each paper or each sampling of the literature via its abstract is different, and that's interesting to me, and I think that's maybe even an intriguing way that analysis could go in the future. And I guess then leading to the what if, this plot in the bottom, this is the similar kind of NMDS plot, but this is actually ecological data, and I wanted to throw this up here only to say that the metadata that you can collect about the literature is going to be really how useful either approach here is, the tree and or the map, the clustering or the NMDS. And so what you're looking at here are communities, samplings of different communities that have been in forests, that have been an interior forest or one that's on the edge of a geothermal development. And then the composition of the beetle species, do they differ? Well, they do. So the blue and the communities of blue and red are significantly different. These vectors, the blue arrows that are here, are essentially environmental variation that can help you describe the space. And so the XY axis is a measure, we can picture it as being a measure of temperature, how hot or cold the environment is. And then to a lesser extent, they also differ on the Y axis, on the vertical, along precipitation. So in this case, in this ecological example, the very simple abiotic factors of temperature and precipitation help us describe why how these communities are different. So I guess then one of the next questions, the next question is this kind of thing interesting, or is this just like, well, thanks nerd, well done, move on. If one or both of them is valuable, then I think it's going to be really worth collecting the kind of metadata on which to plot, to either create these these ellipsoids, or to create the vectors that describe the space. And that's up to us or you, what kind of metadata can you add to that abstract, like discipline, scientific discipline, nation, details about the author, the era, like is there a trend through time in the literature, details about the analysis, details about use or proposed use, the degree of transdisciplinarity, all those kinds of things. So that's kind of it. That's all that I wanted to say, and it is dark at the end of the day here. So I look forward to hearing more about how you think this might be valuable, or how you can change it and make it even more valuable. So cheers, and à la prochaine.